I have 5 children, and really we've been in a spot where we have had up to 4 main lessons at a time, or 3 main lessons and a kindergartner. So the year that we had that, we had a kindergartner, we had a 5th grader, a 7th grader, and a 9th grader. And so the older kids, those were really heavy main lessons to prepare. And within that, and in the years past, I really sort of perfected how I do things. And it's really been very helpful to me, just as I've been going through with the other children. And I know it's been really helpful to the clients that I've worked with. So I really want to share that with you. I don't want you to get afraid of what I'm going to show you as far as depth goes. I want you to know that the longer you do this, the easier it gets. So while I still go through all of the prop drawings, and we'll talk about that for my younger son, I have a lot of them still for my older kids. So I'll pull those out and use those as props. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to start by talking about sort of media, and is hard copy better than digital copy, and sort of how you get around that and how you sort of decide what's best for you. So I wanted to show you a few different mediums for for deciding that. So of course you can always get the hard copy of our curriculum. We have the digital copy that's easily available to you. So I wanted to show you a little bit about how the different digital copies look, because a lot of people say, well, I can't sit in front of a computer all day. Well, I wouldn't sit in front of the computer all day. I would invest in, if you don't already have one, an e-reader or a tablet. And by a tablet, that could be an iPad, that could be an Android tablet, or an e-reader. We like the Note from Barnes & Noble, and I'll show you that. And I have this laptop. So if you're in the market for buying a new laptop, think about this. This is the Surface, and I like it because it becomes a tablet. So it's a full-on computer, and I can use it with a keyboard and everything, but it also becomes a tablet very easily. So those are just some easy ways to be able to sort of take your work with you. And I like that because often I'm not planning at home, and one less book in my bag is an amazing thing. So so just sort of think about that. But I wanted to show you really quick what the differences are, so that you can understand why an e-reader might be easier on your eyes than maybe a screen from a tablet or an iPad. So this is a teeny little Android tablet, and I have this one just to sort of help keep me away from the computer when I'm on longer situations where I'm not going to be at the computer very often. So I like this for my planning. I like it a lot because I can load the grade that I'm working on here. I can also load, I love the program Evernote, and I know a lot of people like to plan by paper, and I also use a lot of paper in my planning. But I love Evernote for putting and organizing all of our main lessons in, so that it's easily then printed out, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But I love it because I can take this with me, and it has all the lesson plans that I put on the computer. They're also on here. So I really like this for that purpose. But a lot of people aren't really crazy about this screen because it does look just like a phone screen, and it can get tiring on the eyes if you're doing a ton of reading. So Eric has this handy little tool, and he does a lot of reading. And this is an e-reader, and it has e-ink, and so it looks a lot like a book. And you can turn the pages just like you would in a book. And when you do, you can see there's no glare on it. It's a very matte screen, and the ink on it looks very much like the ink on a page. So for somebody who's really struggling with being able to utilize a regular screen, this is an excellent option. And you can download all of our ebooks, any PDF, onto something like this. So it makes it very nice to be able to have everything with you. Of course, you can't access things like Evernote on something like this, but you can very easily access all of the things that you need to read. And there's also ways that you can mark up and highlight PDFs too on these readers. So it's a very nice tool if you're having trouble with the glare on a regular screen or on a tablet. So now I'm going to move on to the next step. After showing you a little bit about what your options are on digital versus paper, I want to walk you through the actual process from plan to getting ready to prepare or to present your lesson. So if you're using our curriculum, and if you're brand new, honestly, our curriculum is hands down awesome because we lay it all out for you, And so it will really, really help you with regards to sort of getting your feet wet and getting acclimated. A lot of people that end up writing their own later, they start here and then they gradually add in some things here and there that they want to, but you really don't have to. Our curriculum is very complete. And in fact, if you stayed away from things like Pinterest and lovely internet blogs, you would know you'd have all that you need right here. So don't ever feel like, oh, I have to add a bunch of stuff to it, because you really don't. This is a complete Waldorf curriculum, and when we put it together with that in mind, for the person that is brand new and also for the seasoned homeschooler that just wants to make things very streamlined and easy for them. So I want to talk about how we have our lesson plans laid out. And so let me get to that page. So in each one of our curriculum for the grades, so grade 1 plus, we have a handy year at a glance, and that sort of lays the blocks out for you at a glance. And then we also have sort of the daily lesson portion. So when we're talking about planning, we're talking about people that are still using this, and you still have to go through and you still have to do planning. And if you're just using the curriculum as is, your planning is going to look a little bit different than maybe what I'm talking about. And let's go over that really quickly. So if you're looking at, and this is the grade 3 curriculum, September week 1, lesson 1, form drawing, review time and months of the year. So how do you translate that into a lesson? Well, we have lesson backup material that goes through every lesson and lays it out in a little more detail than what you get in the year at a glance. And with that, so for instance, again, this is grade 3, lesson 1. We have a form drawing that you can use for review. We have a poem that you can use for writing practice. So this being lesson 1 is your first week of the year, and it's sort of getting your feet wet after having a break. So if you're preparing for this, you want to make sure that you've read this completely. So when I talk about planning and I say read the curriculum from cover to cover, I mean from grade 1, from the title page, so you know who I'm giving credits to, all the way to the end. That's how you will know the depth of planning that you need to go into. And it's also how you will get to know your child for this year. We have a lot of stuff on ages and stages in the curriculum, so don't skip any parts. Sit down and read it. I try to write very conversationally, so it's not dry, dull reading, and it should go fairly quickly. The nice thing is then you can mark up what you need to go back to, keep notes on what you need to go back to, and sort of make sure you put it all together. Now, I really like to work every lesson through in my head completely, so that I have all of the variables for each lesson. And I wouldn't do that like 6 months in advance. That's work that I would do, on Sunday in preparation for the week's lessons. I would make sure that I work through each one of them in my head, how I'm going to lay them out. And if I have a painting or a drawing, say we're doing a story, and we're on day 1 of a story, and this would be for all of the lower grades. Say we're on day 1 of the story and we've given a story, I always have a prop. So I'm going to grab for you sort of what our props look like. And these, I like to keep them. If you have multiple children, keep your props, because that really saves your work. I always have a prop, and sometimes the prop is on the chalkboard. And so I'll take a picture of the chalkboard so that I'll have it later. But you always want to have a prop to go with your story. It makes your story go so much better. And it also then becomes your foundation for what you might be doing for your painting or your drawing or your modeling as well. So I have prop drawings that I've kept and prop paintings. And so if we were telling the story of the golden goose, this would be my prop. And then afterwards, we would paint this together. So by the time I take it to the child and the lesson, I've already painted it once before, at least once before. If I mess up, I paint it again. So when I'm using it as a prop, this was when I did it so that I could make sure that I knew how to go through it. So a lot of places where the lessons break down is when you don't do this step. When you just assume, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to paint the golden goose with them, and you've not done it before, that's often where it breaks down. Your child needs you to be the authority, and if you've not practiced, you cannot be the authority. So you need to be able to know how to control the paint for each for each step in it. You need to be able to know exactly what you're going to draw. You want to have all of that put together. So that, I know that sounds like a lot, but really it gets easier the more you do it. So because I'm on child number 4, going through the grades now, I've done it for a while. If you've only got 1 or 2 children, then it will be new for you, but look at it as an experience in really taking the time to get to know the art. And if the art scares you, go through the mom lessons. That's why we have them there. We have mom lessons on painting and mom lessons on drawing, mom lessons on modeling. Go through those lessons. That's why they're there, and take the time to really learn. It doesn't take a lot of time to learn. You know, I had a stroke 2 years ago, and I lost so many, like it's just gone. So I've had to relearn a lot of stuff again, and it comes back really fast. So, you know, don't be intimidated by doing this step. This step alone will save you a ton of time. It will also save you, especially if you have difficult children or perfectionist leaning children, it will save you in arguments because you've already got it done. It's so easy when you don't have the step finished to just go, oh, forget it, I'm just not going to do school today. Having this step done will save your bacon. It will save you so much time. So again, I have it done usually, and then we will utilize this after the story for their painting, drawing, or modeling lesson. And I've got, this is one that I painted years ago, so I might use the painting as a prop. I should hold it right side up. And then this year with Sam, we actually did it in a drawing form. But I also had this drawn beforehand, before he and I sat down together to draw it. And again, it's so that you know every nuance. I knew exactly how I was going to make brown. Knew exactly where everything was going to go. And you know, I have questions about, well, what if your child doesn't want to draw what you draw? And I always tell my children, and I've never had problems, and I have had really difficult children. I always tell my children, we're going to do it my way first, and then you are welcome to draw, paint, or model whatever you want. But this is a lesson, and this lesson you can't learn if you don't do it my way. And so you're teaching them how to control the paint, how to use the colors. You're teaching them how to use the block crayons. That's part of the lesson. That's what makes Waldorf such an awesome, well-rounded curriculum, because you're doing each one of those steps within the larger scope of the lesson. I also keep a main lesson book for myself. And I do this so that I can do the lessons in advance. Sometimes my prop drawings are smaller because, you know, we live in California, so our house isn't as big as it was in Utah and Idaho. So I don't have a chalkboard these days. So I utilize often this big sketch pad, and I also keep a main lesson book of my own. And so I will do the drawings in here before I present them to Sam. And then I will often, I will sit down and do them with Sam again, so that he has me doing them with them. If you've got a child that's really bulking, I think you really need to look at, are you staying with, especially that younger child, and by that I'm talking like grades 1 through 4 easily. Are you right there with them as they're doing their lessons, or are you up doing something else? If you're up doing the dishes or on your phone or trying to get something else done, you're not going to have the follow through that you need with this child. So take the time to sit down and go through the lesson with them again. I promise it's really not as hard as it sounds. Once you get in the groove of doing it with each child, it gets a lot easier. And as they get older, you don't really need to do it as often. So I stopped sitting through every single drawing portion of the lesson probably by 6th grade. And I know that sounds like a long time that you're gonna have to do it, but I have a lot of fun with the history portions of the curriculum, and so I don't mind doing that. So find things about the curriculum that you really like. Do you really like math? Have a good time with math. Do you really love the science portions? Have a great time with the science. For me, it's history, so I don't mind. I don't mind sitting down and going through those things. But I wanted to show you just sort of how I've kept my own main lesson book, and that way, sort of as we're doing the drawings together, it becomes, and the paintings together, it becomes my backup. And it also becomes a great way for me, as I'm planning, to sketch things out and know exactly what we're going to do for the lessons that month. And I do try to get the main lesson paintings, drawings, modelings at least done in my head. I try to get them done a month or so in advance. So I may be painting one morning for a lesson that I'm not going to do for a few weeks, but that's part of the planning process. You sort of know what's coming, and that really saves you. And having at least 2 weeks planned out in detail will save you from those days of, well, I don't have my bacon together, so I'm just not going to do it. And so I would really put that into your plan. And you know, I've talked in many places about sort of the big overall yearly plan, and where I make a piece of paper and I fold it. So I'm not going to really go over that now because I talk about that in a lot of other planning videos. But this is, you can see, this is for the 2015-2016 school year, and I have it right in here on top of my other planning. So I have this with me all the time because I want to see what my thought process was when I was laying out the blocks. So I may not remember in March why I plan to do something in September, but if I look back on this, I have all of my notes together. And I have ours, mine color-coded for each one of the children. So I have each one of them color-coded so that it is very easy for me to go, oh, well, Ellie's always blue. So I can look at all the spots that are blue and look for her. So I want to show you too, excuse me, more, I keep this binder together, so I do it in Evernote and then I print it out because I do like to be able to mark it up, and having that ability as you're doing your weekly planning. Maybe somebody gets sick, or maybe you decide to drop everything and go on a day trip. That happens to us a lot. And so I have to shift some things around. So having it all printed out is super helpful. So I wanted to show you sort of the depth that I go into with each of them within my notebook. Now, I grab this notebook off the shelf in the morning before lessons just to review everything. I've already reviewed it on Sunday before the coming week. You know, I've laid out this plan. I try to have this plan completely done for the first for September through December, completely done by the first part of August. That way, if I need to make changes, I can easily make those changes. So this first one I'm in love with Post-it flags. You can tell. I have all of the kids sort of sectioned out with Post-it flags, so it's very easy for me to get to their lessons. This first section is Soraya. So this is the year that she was 4. And really, you don't have to do anything with a 4-year-old at all. But if you have older children, then the youngest child is often wanting to know, what are you going to do for me? So for her, we just focused on circle, and I sort of sketched out a year of stories. And we have our 4-year-old lesson plans available on the site. It's under resources. So if you have a 4-year-old and you want to sort of see what we did, you are welcome to just download those from there. But I went through and I put every story. So we did a different story a week. Put every story down, where it was coming from, what the author was. If it was a story that we didn't have, then I would put that on my list at least 2 weeks in advance, so that I always had it here when we were going to tell the story. A lot of the books that we chose, we had copies of. So having her plans all in one place was super, super helpful. Then I could just grab the circle that we were doing, and we're going to do a whole other video on circle time, but I could grab the circle time information, I could get those things memorized, and easily then just pop her stories in here. Now, I don't always memorize stories. When we have picture books that we really like, that we've spent time to purchase, we just use the picture books. Really memorizing stories is something that's important for grade 1. I wouldn't stress about it a whole lot in kindergarten unless it is a story out of a book with no pictures. So when it's not a picture book, then I definitely try to memorize the story. I don't want them to see me reading from the book. So I try to commit it to memory as best as possible. The only time that I would maybe bend on that would be if it's a story that I know I can't do justice to unless I read it. So let's see here. So now let's look at Sam. So Sam's lessons. This is Samuel's lessons in depth. And we did 3 days of school this year. And that helped us because we also have a co-op that we spend one day at, and they spend one day with their dad while I work. So, and they usually do educational things on those days. So I want you to see very in depth here. So when I write review, measure, page 75, it's from the curriculum. It came right out of the curriculum. And I wrote it here so that I knew exactly what I was doing. I didn't have to thumb through the book. And I've got here, review the Hanukkah story. So how are we going to do that? And we've already told the story, so it's just review. Form drawing review. So I've got a list of forms that I've already put together that we're doing for review. And then we were doing some baking for our co-op. So, I have it right in there. You can see how every single thing that we do is in here. We're practicing the flute. So we have a song, and I write the song name, and what I do, because we have our music book, and it's also digital, but I've printed it out. I just usually slip it into the binder, say behind this page, so that it's right there and easy to get to. And then it's easy for Sam to practice. I don't have to hunt for it. So I am very deep in detail here, and very detailed as far as what it is that I expect from myself and what it is that I'm going to expect from Sam. So you can see here on day 2, part of his reading was, and this is my acronym here for Journey to the Promised Land. His reading was the Abraham story. And so for our main lesson drawing, I would draw something from that story and have it together. So I'll actually give you an example here from the Thubal Cain story, or here's one from the Garden of Eden story. Both of them came out of the Jacob Strait books. And so I had them drawn in advance, and then we did them for his story for his main lesson. So having all of those pieces together in one place is extremely helpful. So when I get ready to do school during the day, I just grab this binder in the morning, and this is what sits open on my kitchen table as we move through our school day. And it also gives me a way to mark off in my head, okay, we already did that, it's time to move on to this next thing. And it allows you to have all of the pieces then sort of coordinated by having them all written out. And you don't have to use Evernote. I know a lot of people love to use bullet journals or just a notebook. That is absolutely acceptable too. Just make sure you go into enough depth. So if you're watching this and you homeschooled last year and you struggled through some things last year and it was because of prep, look at how deep your lessons were and how deep your planning was. Did you go through it in your head? Did you, account for everything? Did you read the stories in advance? Because even though Sam is doing some of this reading, I already know what the reading's about. I can't just hand him the book and say, go read about Abraham, and I don't know what the Abraham story is, because then totally defeats the purpose of bringing a lively lesson. So, in this case, he's doing some of the main lesson reading. In grades 1 and 2, that's not going to be the case. You're going to be telling the story, and then you're going to be drawing, painting, or modeling from it. In other grades, you're going to have a mixture of the two as well. So sort of keep that in mind. And if you have questions on what is appropriate for you, then please don't hesitate to drop me a note. I also wanted to show you, I do have Ellie's in here as well. In her depth, she was in these were her 9th grade plans. So let's start here. I know exactly what she's starting with. I knew that day I wanted her to start with the Nelson Mandela book that we were working on, and we were reviewing Africa's geography. So how do we do that? Well, I would probably pull out a map of Africa, and I think in her case we had like a blank map that I had off of the internet that I just allowed her to go through and write down the ones that she remembered, and we went over the ones that maybe she had trouble with. And then she had math, and we've been using Jamie York's Making Math Meaningful. So in that, when you've got bigger kids, so from about 6th grade up, you're doing math for about an hour a day. And I really cap it at an hour, and some kids can't handle an hour. Some kids need 2 sections of 30 minutes or 4 sections of 15 minutes. That totally works. But again, that's only for grade 6 and up. The younger kids do not need that much math. So I had sort of everything down here that I wanted her to be working on. And I didn't have handwork identified because it seems like when I did the lesson plan, we weren't quite sure where she was going to be on a previous project that she was working on. So, I didn't have down exactly what I wanted her to do. You can see that when I have bigger things that we covered, I actually wrote the YouTube video down that I wanted her to watch, because there are times, especially with older kids, that you can't that you can find people that teach the subject far better than you can. And I find that it is absolutely okay to use media for older kids. And for older, I'm talking like 7th grade and up. I'm not talking about little kids at all. And I always, always, always watch it first so that I can have a discussion with her about it, because that is part of the main lesson, especially for the older child. It's a lot about discussion, and it's a lot about being able to bring it to life for them. And so her artwork might look a lot different. She really enjoys painting and doing a lot of free things on her own when it comes to the art for her main lessons. So that's I wanted to walk you through sort of an older child. And I have everything written out in detail so that I know exactly what she's going to be working on that day, and I know sort of how we're going to tackle everything. Having those plans laid out is such a problem solver for me. It's such and even though it sounds like a lot of work, it's really not. It's really not as big as it seems. So I hope that was really helpful. I hope that that you could easily understand sort of how to integrate all of the pieces that you have into one place, and that's really what main lesson planning is all about. I take the elements from the curriculum and the page numbers, everything. Even if I'm using a book of poetry like this, you can see I have post-it flags on mine. I will put post-it flags on the page, and I will write the page actually right in our lesson plan, so I know exactly where everything is, and I've really sort of played it through. And like I said, even though it sounds like a lot, I think that once you get in the habit of doing it, and it's harder, I think, I'm choleric. It's fairly easy for me to execute a plan, because the sanguine in me loves to do the planning, and the choleric in me is like, gotta get it done. But I know that it can be harder for other temperaments. So what I would do is I would really, really think about what it is that gets you off track. 9 times out of 10, doesn't matter which temperament it is, 9 times out of 10, it's how deep your planning is. If your planning isn't deep enough and you are scrambling the morning of your lesson to put something together, then it's not going to be a good lesson. I've had those days, where I haven't done my prep work, so those become park days. Those become days that I go, well, I would rather not bring a lesson halfway, so I will just not do it at all. That's why we have extra days put into our school week, and then I will make sure that evening I am ready for the next day. So, and the things like that happen. It definitely happens that maybe you had a child that was up all night, or maybe you were up later than you thought you were going to be, and you just didn't get all of your planning done, and you weren't able to get up before your kids. But that's one of those things that I'm doing in the morning when I'm up before my kids, is making sure that everything is laid out for the day and that I have everything ready for them. When I have everything ready for them, school flows so beautifully. So beautifully. It's so nice. We can go from breakfast to going on our walk to sitting down to do school, and it flows very beautifully. So, take the time to do the planning. And if you are watching this and you are, it's under the gun and you've just got a few weeks to go for school before school starts, or maybe even a few days, then do our boot camp planning. It's in the planning section, and then still try to get 2 weeks of having main lesson prompts put together and having your planning done in detail is golden. It is much better than nothing. And then as you get to the end of the first week, sit down and plan the next 2 weeks so that you have everything planned out. And I would then try to carve out a good 4-hour block so you could get a good month or 2 months done, so you're not constantly feeling like you're catching up. Because when we're constantly feeling like we're catching up, we don't actually ever feel like we get caught up. We feel like we're constantly running. So really keep that in mind. And if you're planning sort of when you're supposed to plan, I always tell people start planning in April. For the coming school year, and that means that in April you're starting to gather your resources. You're thinking about purchasing your curriculum if you haven't already. You're going through what things you're going to be teaching in the fall. When you have those things in place and you're actually properly planning, then planning is a piece of cake. In July you're working on your main lesson drawings because you've already got a lot of your planning done. So keep those things in mind as you're making new habits and trying to really bring Waldorf home to your kids. So I hope this was helpful and educational for you. And if you have questions, please drop me a note. Thanks.